We're gonna do some Fartnite today, and I'm probably gonna fuck with some YouTube. Black girl stocks. It's funny. Let me put up. Okay. Again, look at my Focusrite interface. I feel like the volume's kind of low, but whatever. Let me see what's going on. See what's going on in the world.
And they're not these, brutalist buildings all around DC.
Let's see.
Republicans about fraud, waste, and abuse for my entire life. And this is, to me, just another latest effort that doesn't seem to be rooting it out as efficiently as they promised.
Yeah, I don't. I can't get anyone at the Genius Bar to help me out. Like, I'm not sure that that's a goal, right? I don't know. It's too funny.
Versus 50.
The president has been in an interesting cycle this week because he's pointing towards April 2nd, Liberation Day.
Right.
And we've been spending a lot of time talking about this whole Signal group chat flap. But the White House seems to be kind of hamstrung at the moment. It's sort of an intermission.
I do some
Right.
riffs
Will
a
it
little
feel
bit.
different when we finally get to the tariffs next week?
I
Does the
wanted to work
narrative
on new
follow the
shit.
president?
I
That's
need to
Well,
release
we'll
my
have to
old
see how
stuff,
that
man.
works
Like,
because
it's gonna be April.
he has
It's gonna
been
be
in this
summer.
sort of, there was the
That's the whole
honeymoon,
season.
sort of all through January and early February. And then it all sort of began to shift. People were unhappy with Musk. People were unhappy with the sort of very extreme deportation efforts. There were, judges keep pushing back on those efforts. And then there was this flap with the national security team all discussing war plans on Signal, including, I think, Steve Witkoff saying he was going to log on from Moscow, which seems not that secure. And then this, the Elise Stefanik back and forth on whether she would be the UN ambassador. Things just don't seem to be going that smooth. And this is something that we saw in the first Trump term.
I need to sell some more shoes.
Where it started out rocky and sort of stayed rocky. This time it was smooth and efficient, and he's got all these people who will just happily carry out his agenda. And now it all seems to be sort of stumbling along over like a gravel road all of a sudden.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the news cycle moves so quickly. This could be a different conversation by the late edition of Balance of Power.
Right, and you talk about April 2nd being the Liberation Day on taxes, but Kristi Noem is meeting with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum today. If President Sheinbaum promises Kristi Noem some more actions on drug trafficking or immigration, those tariffs may go away. So the markets are just trying to figure out which end is up, what's happening, and even if they plan for April 2nd, it might not be what they expect.
You mentioned Elise Stefanik. By the way, the White House did clarify, I guess Witkoff was on a secure line when he was in Russia. That's something that we talked about a bit, of course. I want to ask you about these Florida specials next week, because it seems that's why we're talking about a different game plan here for Elise Stefanik.
Right.
Doesn't she wish she went first, huh? Like your bags are packed, now you're staying in the house.
Right.
Because apparently there's legitimate worry about these races. In Florida, we have two specials. Of course, it's the seat that belongs to Michael Waltz, the president's national security advisor. A new GOP poll shows Josh Wilde, the Democrat, up 3 points over Randy Fine, the Republican. Not just too close to call, but actually leading him in a race that has gone completely upside down over the past couple of weeks.
And that's a district that Trump won by 30?
By 30 points.
Yeah,
so now
30
put
points.
yourself in Hakeem Jeffries' shoes. He
Right.
talked about this yesterday. Here's what the Democratic leader in the House had to say.
Florida won and Florida 6. Donald Trump won those two districts respectively by 30 and 37 points. How is it that they are even competitive at this point? Why are Republicans panicking in deep red districts? So they do have a numbers problem that they're going to have to try to resolve. But that's for Republicans to work out.
So in our remaining
Let me go ahead
minute
and
and
back
change
down.
here, are Republicans panicking?
Let's
Is this a
go
barometer?
here.
Or are we at the risk of making too much of it?
Oh, no, I think they're nervous, if not panicking. And remember, Elise Stefanik comes from a northern New York district near the Canadian border, where her constituents are probably looking at these
not
Canadian tariffs like, you know, that it is going to affect them deeply, and they're upset about it. And if she were to leave, and it being New York, it's possible that even though she wanted to see this, that a Democrat might rise up and replace her. No, I think Hakeem Jeffries is right. I just hope, I just wonder whether Democrats will be able to capitalize on this as they're sort of doing their 4 years in the legislature.
We've come full circle here in our seconds. Elon Musk, where we started, is going to Wisconsin to get involved directly in stuffing. He's got a couple of $1 million. He's going to get I guess, during this election. Can he make a difference?
He might be able to. I mean, it would be interesting if the frustration with Trump boils over to him, or if there is enough Elon Musk celebrity still out there that he could make a difference. He certainly has the money to do it.
Right here in Washington on the Fashion Show. There's a lot more to talk about we haven't even touched on yet. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. Our signature panel on the Friday edition at the top of the hour. Kaylee Lyons will join, and we are waiting for this 4-week IPO to get going. When it happens, you'll hear about it right here on Bloomberg.
Damn. Got my ass kicked. No. The hell? Man, that fucked me up. What's this idiot doing? What are you fucking doing? Fuck. I should have gotten out of there. That was a serious battle though. I wasted like all my ammo. Fuck. Come on. They were like right on. They were on it, man. Those motherfuckers with the fucking bullshit. Fuck! God damn it. Ugh. It's over. Fuck. Got my ass kicked. I had all these cool weapons too, and I still was terrible.
So that's at least the state of play in the market right now. As you know, Trump can change his mind. The market will gladly hop on and buy now that we're back down at these levels that are not at the low that we've seen from this correction we've seen in the market, but getting back close to it. So it's really sort of a nail biter of a market, watching every headline, watching every rumor and piece of news coming out of Washington about how serious Trump is to follow through aggressively with all these tariff plans.
Just have to ask you while you're here, Michael, about CoreWeave. We've got an important IPO that we're waiting for. This can start trading at any moment. Price lower than expected. We understand NVIDIA and some other institutional buyers had to do a lot of buying to keep this thing afloat. How should we be looking at this Could a successful IPO
And do one more
change
game
moods on Wall
and
Street
then
and help the
get to
markets, or is this
maybe
an
a game
indication
or
in
two.
itself that it had to be scaled back about where we really are?
Yeah, I think it's hard to call it a successful IPO, regardless of what the price does, considering how much it was scaled back. Part of that is just a risk-off move of the market, but part of it is really a rethinking of this AI, this bullish thesis for the market surrounding AI, and it's kind of hard to separate the two, which is which, but certainly a down market like this is a tough time to go public for any company, regardless of their prospects.
Well, I'm sure the building's going to shake when this thing starts trading, so we'll let Michael Regan go. It's great to see you, sir. Have a great weekend. Of course, Bloomberg senior editor, and when this does begin, you'll hear about it, of course, on Bloomberg Radio, on TV, and on YouTube, where you can find us now by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. Maybe there won't be tariffs next week if these meetings keep going well, right? We heard earlier about meetings with Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. There was a meeting today between President Trump and the Prime Minister, who he actually called him the Prime Minister of Canada. In a Truth Social post, said things went pretty well when he spent some time with Mark Carney earlier. There, you can see it on YouTube. Let me pull it up here. In the studio, Donald Trump saying, "I just finished speaking with Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. It was an extremely productive call." So, are we maybe walking back some of these tariffs here on both sides of the ledger? If you listened to Carney earlier today, the answer, by the way, would be a big fat no. He was singing Taylor Swift when it came time to talk about Canada's relationship with the U.S. Listen.
I reject any attempts to weaken Canada, to wear us down, to break us so that America can own us. The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear?
What are you doing?
Is that we, Canadians, have
We are never, ever getting back together. Our signature panelists here, Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University, our Democratic analyst, and of course Rick Davis, political strategist, partner at Stone Court Capital, our two Bloomberg Politics contributors. That doesn't sound great. Rick, when you listen to Carney,
nice.
but Donald Trump says on Truth Social they had a very productive call. Where are we in this
Take that thermite.
I think you're muted, Rick, if you can fix that for us. Jeannie, if you want to take a stab at it, what do you think? How would you define this moment?
Well, Joe, you were thinking Taylor Swift. I was thinking NSYNC because I'm older, I guess. I'm sad to say. Bye, bye, bye. The whole thing was so sad with the Canadians saying, it's over. You know, I think we have to remember the domestic political scene that Carney finds himself in with the election just a few weeks away. And Donald Trump, quite frankly, he should really be sending flowers to, because Donald Trump has been a boon for Carney and his party. They are, you know, back from a 20-point deficit at this point, and he is going to continue running against Donald Trump. I think the question is going to be what happens on Liberation Day, what happens on Election Day in Canada, how our relationship moves forward. But, you know, the idea that any of us would be sitting here talking about not having a relationship with Canada, it's just mind-numbing, Joe Matthew, mind-numbing for a girl from New England.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're older, by the way, but I just will park that for right now.
Thank you,
Rick,
Jeff.
if I keep reading this, no, it's the least I can do. We will be meeting immediately, he says, after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, all other factors will end up being great for both the U.S. and Canada. He wraps it saying, "Thank you for your attention to this matter!" Exclamation point. I'm not sure what the matter is here, but if you're reading Donald Trump, things are going fine. Rick, why would there be tariffs?
Yeah, I think first of all, the Canadians muted me in my earlier episode. My comments were, Mark Carney has forgotten the first rule of politics: never say never. I mean, of course we're going to have a relationship long term with Canada, and I think that obviously the White House staff, who rapidly Donald Trump on that post to me
Got killed.
are trying to de-escalate. And I would say right now, this is de-escalation Friday. I mean, we've seen that related to Greenland. We've seen it related to Canada. I mean, maybe they de-escalate before they escalate on April 2nd. But at the end of the day, it's certainly an effort by Donald Trump and the White House to calm things down with our northern partners. Carney doesn't seem to want anything to do with it, and I think Jeannie's right. It's good politics for him to get in the fight with Donald Trump. And he's got an election coming up, so there you have it.
I don't know what's going on in Greenland. Maybe we'll get some reconciliation there. But J.D. Vance is on the plane. The delegation. They're on the ground for, what, 2 hours or something? 6 hours each direction to get there. He's with the second lady and Michael Waltz. The administration this week. National Security Advisor. Air Force Two touched down at the Space Force base in Greenland a little while ago. It's 3 degrees. Jeannie and Kate Sullivan from Bloomberg is along for the ride. We're seeing her dispatches here via email. An uneventful flight, she says. We could see Waltz in one of the cabins closer to the front of the plane. Fox News played on the television. Imagine this. We flew for hours over massive sheets of cracked ice and snow-covered mountains as we made our way up through Canada. Yeah, they flew over Canada. And then over to Greenland. Fast forward to the next note.
Good weapon.
J.D. Vance at U.S. Space Force headquarters up there. Quote, "It's cold as S here. Nobody told me," unquote. Prompting laughs. Jeannie, is this trip a joke?
It is not a joke. First of all, go Kate, and I hope she's successful in getting them put Bloomberg on the televisions in Air Force One. So go Kate, we're all waiting for you. You know, what has been so fascinating, and I don't think this is a joke at all, is that the way in which this trip has changed. I mean, at first it was going to be our second lady taking a trip, a cultural trip. She was supposed to go dog sledding, or I guess watch dog sledding, not go dog sledding, and all kinds of cultural activities. But come to find out, when your husband is out there attacking tourists, and when the president of the United States is out there talking about
What was that, bro? Oh my God. I should have gotten the fuck out of there. Next time, get out of there.
The change in the trip itself is just so important. And, you know, they are not any more welcome than the Vance family. All the signs you're seeing, and I'm sure Kate is reporting, here, which is the same thing that the Vermonters were saying.
John Rebek Clemenson of the Danish Defense Academy tells the nation's TV2, Davis, the biggest foreign policy crisis since World War II for Denmark.
Holy shit, bro.
So is this trip serious to try to advance the ball on this, or are we thinking this is to see JD on the ground for a couple of hours and it gets
I think Donald Trump's been talking about
Holy shit.
U.S. territory. He did it a lot in
Fucking
his
got
first
my
term. Did it
ass.
while he was a private citizen again, and is obviously right back at it. In fact, little do people talk about Donald Trump right after the election to Greenland to hand out magazines, take pictures, talking about how much they want us there. So this is an ongoing effort to try and do what Donald Trump said in his manifesto. I want to reclaim land that will make America bigger, not just greater. And there's no doubt this is actually serious. We have to
Fuck.
the fact that, as Jeannie said, this trip has changed a lot. Normally, if you're a head of state like J.D. Vance and his wife are, you got to get invited to come. It's not just stop visiting.
Fuck.
So, since they weren't invited, they had to go somewhere that was generally considered sovereign, and that's a military base. So it's, again, I mean, a little competency issue to go along with it.
Politico, senior White House official, framing what J.D. Vance is going to say. Washington. We'll emphasize how the Danish leaders on whom Greenland financial and military support have, quote, spent decades mistreating the Greenlandic people, treating them like second-class citizens, and allowing infrastructure on the island to fall into disrepair. This infrastructure being built in Greenland will have a lot more. And what I'm talking about, eyes on Wall Street.
Holy shit. I was wondering who the fuck. Who the fuck? Nice. I can't destroy it. Still have 467. I'm gonna do like one more round.
Live from Washington, D.C.
Let's balance up.
Markets frown on Washington, whether it's the economic data or the tariffs. Welcome to the fastest show in politics as stocks skid even further today after a meeting with President Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Carney described as productive. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines in Washington. Thank you for being with us on the Friday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Kaylee, all this is happening as we wait for a major IPO to kick off trading here today on Wall Street.
Well, an IPO that's not as big as it could have been or was the plan initially. CoreWeave right now indicated an opening about $40 a share. That is where the IPO price, but the initial range they were looking at was up to $57 a share. So this was downsized in a big way. It speaks not only to the sentiment we were seeing in markets overall, which yes, have been plagued by concerns around tariffs, by not just the inflation, but the growth problems that could emanate from them, but also this idea as to whether or not AI is going to be the revenue generator it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross currents here in a market that's pretty concerned about not only what's already happened, but what will happen next week when it comes to tariffs. We're counting down to what they're calling Liberation Day, less than a week off. Kaylee, and really interesting to see very different commentary from Carney in Canada, Trump in the U.S., who says they had a productive meeting and they're going to be getting together soon. Mark Carney suggesting earlier it's over.
Yeah, the Canada-U.S. relationship is now different than it was before, and yet, you're right, President Trump described his phone call with Carney this morning as being a positive one. He even referred to him as Prime Minister. No jokes there about being the governor of the 51st state.
Well, we'll see if they get together soon. He said they will after the elections.
Yeah, which of course is a month from today, April 20th. Right, so we just have a few weeks to go on that front. So we're still waiting for CoreWeave. We obviously have a lot to cover this hour. Let's get a check on the markets with Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Kaylee Lyons. And we are now at the worst level of the day on the S&P 500 index. The selling continues right now, down 109. The S&P down 1.9%. We've got the Dow down 676 now, down 1.6%. While NASDAQ is down 465 points, a drop there of 2.6%. Stocks are getting hammered.
World economy is crashing.
Gold hitting a record.
Fuck it.
Weakness in the main engines
I wish
of
I
the
had
U.S.
money
economy. Also
to
worries that
spend
inflation could gain
on all this
further
shit, but I do
traction
not.
amid a trade war. Again, the S&P right now, worst level of the day, down 1.9%. 10-year at 4.26% with a 2-year that's now at 3.91%. Gold surging to $3,084 the ounce, a record there, up 0.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 9.10, 69.31 a barrel, and Bitcoin now down 4.1%, 83,739 on Bitcoin. We are awaiting the CoreWeave IPO. It's a cloud computing provider. Also, Apple and Meta platforms set to be hit by fines under the EU's big tech competition rulebook toward the end of next week, with the iPhone maker facing the added threat of recurring penalties under the Blocks Digital Markets Act. Apple shares lower now by 2.4%. We got Meta platforms down now by just about 3.4%. So again, recapping here, stocks lower, worst level today, down by 1.9% on the S&P. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington once again. Your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Tough tape if you're making your debut in public markets. CoreWeave right now indicated at $39.25 a share. That would be below the IPO price of $40 a share. It was already down by the company only raised $1.5 million in that initial public offering. The original range would have meant $2.7 billion, but the day is a rough one. If you're long equities, maybe not a win for CoreWeave to make this level, but in part of that, Joe, because of the economic data we've got from the markets. Beginning with PCE, looking at the Fed's report inflation gauge, which came in hotter than expected. Then you look at more personal look at what the consumer is doing. That's softer. Add on University of Michigan sentiment down, inflation expectations up, specifically long-term inflation expectations. 5 to 10 years out, consumers think it's going to be at 4.1%.
It's a problem. Worries about the jobs report next week.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that you're hearing the word more than the S word, because if you look at the way that the equities market prices today, it's completely broke here. Consumer discretionaries, information technology. However, the bond market rallied, which suggests that the downside surprise to core PCE reading today was actually not the dominant driver. So people are bond traders are not so much worried about inflation as they are worried about growth. This is why the bond market is rallying.
Yeah, yields going down instead
Right.
of up, which is where
Exactly.
you think they would be going if the expectation was the Fed is not going to be cutting anytime soon. But the Fed has also pushed back against the notion of reading too into some of the sentiment data, specifically how Rep was asked about and kind of pushed aside concerns over June-ish inflation expectations data specifically, and how much longer can that go on? We're starting to see it in the hard data too, to some extent.
Yeah, so the University of Michigan survey was a web-based survey late last year, and as a result, the share of Democrats respondents has increased, and especially those who self-identify as strongly Democrats. And so as a result, the inflation expectations really surge. Because if you look at this, the inflation expectations really is very much along partisan lines. And Republicans actually don't see a problem with inflation. And I think that you're right on the money, Kaylee. The Fed has said that they are not going to pay too much attention to the inflation expectations, and which you missed reading, and this is why the bond market is kind of dismissing that you missed reading. And bond market being so forward-looking, they look at this February reading and kind of and they are more worried that the growth of the consumer pullback would be more of a disinflationary driver, which will overwhelm even the April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs.
Liberation Day, and Donald Trump is going to be speaking in the Oval Office shortly here as part of an unrelated event. And Wong, you're an economist, you're a forecaster. You're still expected to do your job, which is to forecast what's coming in the economy. Is your forecast only as good as next Wednesday?
Well, we're forecasting as of next Friday's payroll, and so far our forecast for payroll is actually pretty solid. We're expecting a 200K increase in non-farm payrolls next Friday. A lot of this anxiety over growth has to do with what we're reading in the news, and I think, as Carol said, the hard data so far have not indicated it. It's mostly soft data.
The anxiety over tariffs is what
Right.
we're talking about.
Right.
Does that change your world on Wednesday, depending on what the president says?
Yeah, so if you look at market options data, what we are hearing is that the anxiety over climate, the expected volatility of Friday's payroll report is bigger than the one big price in tariffs on Tuesday. I think it's because the market kind of think that the announcement from tariffs is more lenient and not as crazy as the worst case scenario, whereas there's so much more uncertainty in non-farm payrolls.
Well, and when we consider uncertainty and what the market is going to react to, I also wonder, Anna, as we're looking at the data which indicates a consumer that isn't feeling great, not good vibes, if that for American companies who are thinking about the kind of higher input costs that they're going to face and their ability to pass that on, is it a suggestion that actually that pricing power this time around, where they were able to exercise it during the supply shortages after the pandemic pretty successfully, isn't going to be as successful this time?
Yeah, I think the key here is this economic concept of budget constraint. And in a pandemic, the budget constraint was actually expanding because of the fiscal stimulus and also precautionary savings people have from not spending during the pandemic. But now, this budget constraint that a household face is actually hard. If anything, it's decreasing, right? Because on one hand, it's been eroded by high inflation. On the other hand, many of these income transfers that under Biden administration you see are being are expiring. For example, just one idea is like many student loan borrowers had expected that their student loans would be forgiven, and they have continued with spending, acting as if it would be forgiven. But now these income-driven payment stoppage has been challenged, and it looks like the Trump administration would be pulling the plug on all this stuff. And so I think a lot of this is about the budget constraint. As a result, there's only so much money a household can spend. If things are more expensive on one end, they're going to pull back on the other. So as a result, yeah, I think that companies, American companies, won't be able to pass through all of these increase.
All right, not a good sign for the corporate earnings outlook. Anna Wallin
No,
of Bloomberg
no, it's not.
Economics, thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us. And we want to expand on this conversation now and turn to Joe Livornia, former special assistant to the president and chief economist at the National Economic Council during the first Trump administration. He's now managing director and chief economist for SMBC Nikko Securities America. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Joe, obviously there is a lot of concern out there and a lot of talk about the R word. When you look at the data, both the hard and the soft, do you have the same growth concerns the market seems to right now?
I don't, and Anna's great. We actually overlapped a bit in the first Trump White House.
She is great.
As you mentioned, the hard data still look pretty good. The trend in private job growth is turning up. Hit claims numbers are still relatively low. Gasoline demand is pretty decent, which is a good sign that households are out driving around, and when they do that, they typically are spending. The weekly chain store numbers are holding up well. So I understand the concern in the market. It probably relates to the equity market softening. If it softens enough, there's concern there might be a negative wealth effect. That in turn would really dampen consumption because a lot of the gains we see at the higher income levels. But right now, the hard data look good.
Still Biden data, Joe? When's it Trump data?
That's a loaded question, Joe. What I will say is that the inflation is a problem, and inflation is a lagging indicator. Powell's super core was up 0.4, it was up 0.3 the month before. The 3 and 6 month rates of change are running up in the mid 4s. That's a problem. That's a function of previous policy, both of the last administration and also the Fed, which kept rates too low for too long. It may have exacerbated the situation, Joe, when they cut rates last fall. The administration has a lot of work to do, the current administration, in getting inflation down. I think they're serious about it. We certainly need the lower energy costs. That will help. We need more capital spending, supply-side initiatives to increase the economy's productive capacity will help. My fear is that too many people focus on the demand side and think you need a recession to bring inflation down. It's not necessary.
Well, sure, if we consider the supply-side dynamics as well, which is what you're speaking to about the ramping up of our own capacity. I just wonder about sequencing here. Now, obviously, we've talked a lot about tariffs hitting first before, say, expanded tax cuts hit. There's also the question as to whether or not, yes, tariffs are incentivizing more being made in the U.S., but it takes time to build those factories, to hire those workers. And so how do you see things playing out sequentially here? Can all of that kick in time to avoid the worst-case scenario?
It will depend in large part on the extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the other programs the president has. The corporate rate from 21 to 15%, and then having 100% expensing on CapEx back to January 1. So the sooner we get clarity on the tax bill, the better. Well, my view when I talk to people is I understand the uncertainty around tariffs. That mostly last night was sequencing. We're going to get more information next week. As the budget comes up, I believe tariffs, this is basically tariffs would be used as a revenue source and other the desirous things that you're going to have some revenues once we get a budget bill. I'm maybe up on the optimistic side, but I think we can get a bill before Congress recesses this summer. That'll be helpful because that'll provide a lot of clarity on the outlook and can get these companies to start to reinvest in CapEx and not worry about a massive tax hike that will come in 26.
That would mean that we have to have in Washington, a lot of people believe that the president will have meetings over the weekend, find concessions in some countries, talk about exceptions and markets. Something that sticks to generate revenue.
It makes the most sense to me. If you look right now, we're going to run about $90 billion this year on tariff or customs duties revenue, which is a decent number. A lot of auto tariffs, those will raise $100 billion. We're not assuming long-term behavioral changes, but it's going to raise a substantial amount of money. If you start to carve out all these different things, then you're not going to raise the money, which is going to make it harder to do the other
All right.
factors that are very
I've had
important,
enough
keeping
of that.
marginal rates low on both capital and labor, and then of course spending
What
no
else we
tax
got
on
going
tips or
on?
making
Markets down. Fuck you. I might just eat something here real quick. Yeah, I'm getting hungry. I'm gonna eat for a second and then I gotta go in at 4. Ugh, brutal. Yeah, my stomach's like growling. Yes, exit game.